Hi, I'm Eric Franklin and this is Chelsea, and we're now going to demonstrate how to open your hip naturally. Now, a lot of dancers and yoga practitioners and exercise people are trying to open their hips through stretching and sometimes overdoing it, forcing it, causing themselves to be injured. Muscles get overstretched. Some of them even end up in hospitals with hip replacements. Yes, that does happen. So it's very important that we learn today there's a different way of doing this. And yes, we all have a different body build, but what we can do is optimize in a safe way our hip flexibility. And what we need to do for that is to understand our anatomy, and not just any kind of anatomy, but functional anatomy. In other words, how the body functions in a biomechanically efficient way. The first thing to understand is that in human beings, the pelvis has some flexibility. And this flexibility is key if you want to have good hip flexion. Every time you flex your hip, you have a little bit of a widening in the pelvic floor. You have a little bit of a stretch in the pelvic floor muscles. This is not a letting go. This is so-called eccentric contraction. The sit bones go out, the tailbone goes back. So let's see if we can feel that for a moment. So Chelsea, why don't you hold your sit bones and let's just flex our hip joint and just notice sit bones go out a little bit as you go down. Can you feel that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. Now, if you do the opposite, if you tuck your tail and you push your sit bones together, lift your pelvic floor, you don't have any more hip flexion. Your hips become completely extended. There's no way you can flex your hip. To flex your hip, you need to let the sit bones go out. You need to have an eccentric contraction of your pelvic floor. Tailbone releases back. And this has nothing to do with letting go. And now you might say, well, just a second, we need to lift our pelvic floor to, get stronger. And I totally agree. You can lift and lower your pelvic floor as an exercise. The pelvic floor naturally moves up and down in breathing. We are not talking about that. We are talking about how to create efficient movement. And breathing can happen at the same time, stabilization can happen at the same time. So rule number one, sit bones need to widen, tailbone needs to go back if you want to have hip flexion. If you don't do that, you are going to extend your hips. And this is not just my opinion, this is biomechanics. The second thing we need to understand is that if you want to have flexibility in the joint, the bones that meet at that joint need to counterbalance each other. So this is how the two bones that come together at the hip joint counterbalance each other. When you bend your legs, the femur, which is this bone, does a natural automatic external rotation. So it goes like that. The pelvic half, this bone here, made up of three bones, but they're fused as an adult, is going to counter-rotate, is going to counter that movement. If you allow that to happen, then your hip joint can be free. If you try to open both bones, something like that, or keep them fixedly on top of each other, you are going to get in trouble. So for hip flexion, you need femur out and pelvic half in. And of course, as we said before, sit bones widening. So Chelsea, why don't you get into a pose where you need to have a certain amount of hip flexibility. There we go. We're going to look at how the bones move by placing the bones right here in front of your pelvis and legs. So here are the bones, and what you want to do to increase hip flexibility as you go deeper into the stretch is take the femur out and the pelvic half in. You can see here this blue point is the anterior superior iliac spine, it's called, and it's going to go in as the femur goes out. There we go. And I'm now going to help Chelsea by using my hands to do this. So I'm going to slide the pelvic half in and the femur out. And if we do that, then Chelsea notices it gets easier to flex the hip. So you can feel that. Let's just open the whole thing. Just the idea of let's just open the hip. You can immediately see what happens there is that the pelvis gets tucked like that. And then, of course, someone's going to come along and say, what are you doing here? Lift your pelvis up. You get stiffer and stiffer. Then you try to, keep doing the same thing, opening your hip, and you get sore and tight in there. That does not work. So let's finish up the correct way. When you bend your leg, you want to increase flexibility by taking the femur out and counterbalancing with the pelvis going in. And this is going to engage a certain element of your deep core like that in a natural, organic way. There we go. That's what increases hip flexibility the natural way. Now just take a moment to compare the two hips. Yeah? If you notice this leg and that leg, you notice that leg probably feels more flexible and bendier and just like, more grounded and so forth. So this was first introduction how to do that. Of course, there's a lot more to learn. And if you like this video, please go to our website, franklinmethod.com, and sign up for a free newsletter where you can have many more insights in how to improve your movement skills. Thanks for watching and see you next time.